Our guest speaker tonight is Rees Anderson. Amy was born in Portland, Oregon. She was one of 10 kids, and she went to BYU, BYU Provo. Sorry, I almost said Hawaii. That's where I went. And she started her first company at the age of 24. She went and she was selling software for doctor's offices. From there, after starting her own company, she did consulting for about 10 years, and she launched her company MediConnect Global, which she eventually sold in 2012 for $377 million. That's $377 million more than I've ever seen in one place. So she's very successful. She's won just about every entrepreneurship-related award in Utah and in entrepreneurship in general, including the Entrepreneur of the Year award from Earnst Young and from Mountain West Capital. Not only that, she's an incredible example of a female entrepreneur, and we are honored to have her here tonight. So let's welcome her with a big, warm, startup grind. Welcome.
Thank you. I love the chairs.
Oh yeah, they're comfy.
It's like the cushy chair.
They are very comfy. I'm trying not to fall back.
I know, actually, it's a little awkward though, I'm not going to lie. Do what?
So, Amy.
Yes.
Please tell us a little bit about how you first got started in entrepreneurship. Were you always an entrepreneur when you were a kid?
No, I mean, I would say I wouldn't have described myself as an entrepreneur. I didn't know it. I probably was a little bit of a hustler, get out there, work, do whatever needed to get done from a young age. I liked doing stuff my own way, right? And I think that's some of the tendencies of an entrepreneur. But as far as doing businesses, I always had a job. I got a job early and worked early, and we had 10 kids in our family, so you were expected to get out there and work. So I always had jobs and was always trying to look for the next thing. But I don't think that I thought of myself as an entrepreneur as a kid. It just, when it came down to it and I had to figure out a way to support my 2 kids, I thought, well, I can either go work for somebody else or I can work for myself. And at that point, I kind of had a little bit more faith in my motivation than others, right? So I decided to be an entrepreneur mostly because I thought, well, if I'm going to have to put everything in, I might as well do it for myself. So.
Gotcha. So you went to school.
Yes.
You went to BYU Provo. How did your time at university shape you as an entrepreneur?
So I didn't finish at BYU. I dropped out of BYU because I got married young and had 2 kids young, and so I could only afford at the time to put one of us through. So I didn't finish, although it wasn't because I didn't want to finish, and it wasn't because I don't think it's important to finish. I actually think it's a good thing to finish. I think it's a unique time of your life you never get back. So if you can take advantage of college and go, I'm all about that. My kids will go because they can, if that makes sense. At BYU, I think the things that you form a network in college of people that are going to be really important. It's not just about the classroom that you go in and the people that the teachers. Sometimes you have good teachers, sometimes you have crappy teachers, let's be honest, right? But I think it's about more than just the classroom. You're going to meet friends, you're going to meet people that eventually you could end up doing business with or hiring, or they're all going to go on to different aspects of life, and you're going to have contacts there that will follow you forever. And there's a social growing kind of period of your life that goes on there where you really kind of grow up and become independent. So there's just a lot of good things that I think that came from my time in college that really helped shape me. I wish I could have finished back then, but it just wasn't an option financially, so.
Yeah. How did that motivate you when you went and started your first, I guess, kind of entrepreneurial endeavor?
Well, I had to feed my kids, right? I mean, part of being a good mom is you got to put bread on the table. And I became a single mom when my kids were really little. And so for me, motivation was feeding my family. And so it wasn't about, sometimes it's easier to work hard for someone else than yourself. If it's just you, it's like a little harder to get motivated, but when there's other people involved, you're like, dude, I'm getting this done. So for me, I had a lot of motivation.
Yeah.
I had to make it work.
Do you feel like everybody who was in your situation, that anybody could do that? That could make that decision and become an entrepreneur and see that kind of success through? Or was there something that helped you to get to that point?
I think that entrepreneurship is a tricky thing. I pointed out the example that for me, it was about risk, and it was like I can go to get a job and work for someone else, or do I trust my ability to put in crazy, hard work to get it done? I think it takes different personality types, right? Some people are more comfortable putting their eggs in someone else's basket. Yeah. And I think entrepreneurs almost have to not be. They have to have a little bit more confidence in that they trust their ability to get it done, because it is scary and it is a big risk. And I don't think entrepreneurs are as, people say, oh, they're risk takers. I actually disagree with that. I think, at least in my opinion, I think entrepreneurs are people that think it's less risky to go with themselves, if that makes sense. So I think it's like we look at it as being less risky. It is taking a bigger risk, it appears, to the outside world, but to us it's not as risky as working for someone else who you can't control what they're going to do.
Yeah, you trust yourself 100% versus having an unknown level of trust for somebody else.
Exactly. And so I don't think every person is equipped for it, in the sense of, I think what makes a really good entrepreneur is you got to be able to sell. Like, no matter what, the number one reason companies go out of business is they run out of cash because they didn't make sales. Yeah. So you have to be a personality, and I don't think of myself as a salesman. Like, I can't, when I walk in a store, if they approach me, I run. I hate the salesman, except for on TV. Those guys on TV, like that Ronco guy and all those, I love that stuff. I buy everything on QVC. But I think by nature I shy away from salespeople because I inherently think they're dishonest. It's just a weird, sorry, it's just kind of how you, you do. You think they're just pitching you. And so, but for me, I can sell something if I believe in it. Like, if I believe in something and I believe it's really good for somebody, then it's more just me sharing that with somebody, and I don't think of that as sales.
You're just trying to show them fit.
Yeah, and I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be comfortable doing that. Like, you have to be comfortable believing in what you're doing enough to be able to share it with others, because at the end of the day, you can hire a sales team, but when you're down on your luck, it's you that's going to make those sales.
Okay, so were you always comfortable doing that, or was that something that took a lot of growth for you early on when you first started going to sell these licenses, these software licenses?
So I think here's the thing, I believed in the product and I knew my product, right? So if I knew something, I was super comfortable to pitch it to somebody else. If you handed me something and said, go sell this to someone, I'd be like, I have no idea what to say. Like, I really wouldn't. But if I've used a product and I love it, dude, I will tell you all about it, get you excited about it, be passionate about it. So I think by nature, it stems from when it's natural, when it's real and authentic. I think other people sense it's authentic, and it makes a difference in your desire to buy what they're selling.
So did you just kind of figure it out on your own, or did you have some really good mentors for selling when you first started off?
Well, I had 9 brothers and sisters, and so when you wanted something, you had to be able to present a really good story to mom and dad to get your way, right? So I think part of it was the atmosphere I grew up in helped a lot. And I think so we moved a lot as a kid. I was born in Oregon, as you said, but I lived in Washington State, Michigan, Virginia, Tennessee, Texas, California, and Utah. So we were moving all the time. I went to 4 high schools. Yeah. So as a kid, when you're moving that much, you have to learn how to make friends fast, and you have to learn to be comfortable in any situation, because you guys remember high school, right? It freaking sucks. That's the worst time of life. If you make it through junior high and high school, you are golden, because everything is easier from there when it comes to interpersonal relationships. It's intimidating, right? Especially being the new kid at that age. So for me, I kind of had to learn how to make friends, and I had to learn that people are actually grateful when you come and be friendly to them, and when you walk up to someone and talk to them. I still remember, you talked about going to events and walking away without any connections. Yeah. When I first started out, I was only 23 when I started my first company, and I was a woman in technology, and didn't even realize I was the only woman, right? It didn't even cross my mind that there was no other women in technology. I was good at technology, and so I remember going to an event, and I was so intimidated because I come in, and number one, everybody's way older than me, and there's no women at the event. So I was just wow, okay, this is super awkward. So I'm sitting in the back of the room the first couple times I went to this networking thing, and I didn't talk to anybody because I was so uncomfortable. And then I was finally at one of the events, someone came up and was super nice, and they're like, hi, so nice to meet you. What do you do? And I was like, oh my gosh, I love you. I seriously want to kiss you right now because thank you. I was so grateful that they talked to me, you know what I mean? And I just thought, there was nothing offensive about that. And as I left that night and drove home, I thought, you know what? I can't be the only person who's feeling that awkwardness. So next time I go, I'm going to try to go up to someone else and do what that person did for me. And so I did. I would approach that other person. And so I started doing that. And people were so grateful. And I was like, this is awesome. People are actually just as awkward and uncomfortable as I was. And so if you break that for people, you can make friends easier. Yeah. And I think that taught me some great lessons.
Definitely. When you were first going through your first few sales, how hard was it? You had this huge motivation, you had urgency. Yeah. But when you were first going through it, you were figuring it out all on your own, right?
I was, but I had worked in healthcare offices growing up, in high school and in college. So I kind of had that knowledge of the industry, and I really knew the product I was working with at the time. So for me, it was more educating somebody, not selling somebody. I was just sharing what I knew. So it wasn't as intimidating. I think where sales gets really scary is if you're not educated on, it's you only get 3 I don't knows, and then someone, they're done with you. It's really, by the third, it's good to say I don't know if you don't know, but But when you get to the third one, like, you needed to do your homework first, right? Because you lose credibility fast.
Yep.
So and I think part of it was because I had dropped out of college, and I was so intimidated by that fact that I wasn't a college grad and other people were, right?
Yeah.
That I felt like I had to study 10 times harder. And maybe I did, and maybe I didn't, I don't know. But at the time I felt like I did. So I would if Google gave a degree, I would have like the highest degree from Google University because I lived on Google and I would read everything. So I think I really tried to just know my stuff really well going into every situation so that I wouldn't have to say I don't know.
So you're absolutely prepared.
And be prepared. And I think the more you get prepared, the less fearful you are. So that's the best way to combat being nervous, is really to feel like you've done your homework and you're ready to walk in that situation.
Definitely. I think too, one of the things you touched on is that when you're actually going into it and you do know that are definitely, I think reducing fear is so important for entrepreneurs, because fear is one of those things that just saps away your confidence.
Well, it stops you, right? It stops you from doing stuff you need to get done.
Yeah. So moving on from where you were when you first started selling software, you had a lot of success, but a lot of frustration with the actual product. And it sounds to me like you were very much a product expert, and not necessarily in the beginning an industry expert. And one of the things Vinod Khosla said in an interview I was hearing him, I heard a couple weeks ago, is that when he looks for people, he looks for product experts, not necessarily an industry expert for when he wants to cause disruption. How do you think that your understanding of the product and of the application drove you to take that next leap into software development, which is kind of a huge leap from selling a product to actually trying to build it?
So what he's referring to is I was originally selling a product for another company. I had my own company, but I was a licensed reseller for another software company. And having been a user myself and working in medical offices, I kind of had that exposure to, as a user, I was just a regular user running the systems in the offices, and so I knew what was lame about the systems, and I was like, man, this should be better. And this will totally date me, but at the time, Windows was like the new thing, right? Like we were DOS and Unix, everything was DOS and Unix. It's like half the people are like, we don't even know what she means by DOS and Unix. It's so freaking sad. We didn't even have cell phones until I came to college. I know that's going to shock you guys. But,
did you have a pager when you were?
We had pagers. We full on had pagers at the company for years. The kids probably, they're like, that's what drug dealers do. Yeah, well, that's what normal people had back then too. So we had our pagers. But no, it was for me, it was having been a user, knowing the frustrations of a user, knowing what bothered me, and then being young enough to recognize as new technologies came out, why aren't we using that new technology, right? So one of the areas I hated was anytime we had to get medical copies in an office, you had to go make a photocopy, pull a chart. Like I have ADD, that was super boring for me, so I was like, I hate that job. And scanners, like Windows and scanning, and it was like, oh, you can take an image, and I'm like, why don't they incorporate that into their systems? But when I tried to get the company I was selling for to do that, you're dealing with legacy, right? And that's one of the opportunities for young people, is like there's these legacy systems that have been around so well, and they work, and they're not having to spend money on them. So companies don't have this incentive to go and change it because it's too expensive for them. Whereas young people can come out and go, here I was young, Windows is there, scanning is there, why are we not utilizing these things? It gave me this advantage because I could start fresh, and it's so much cheaper to start fresh with new technology a lot of times than to change existing technologies over. And so it really opened the door for me to be able to utilize those. And I think that's where young people, especially today, have such a huge opportunity because they see things differently. They grew up with a world that's so different than the world I grew up with.
Yeah.
I learned how to do accounting on control effects little sheets where you had to take ledger cards and carbon copy paper, and that's literally how they did. I know everyone's like, oh my gosh, Excel didn't exist yet.
Okay, so and I don't even know how
but I'm just saying, like it was such a different world that I grew up in, and now these kids come out, like 2-year-olds can use an iPad better than anybody I know. It's amazing. And they're not even getting, you just hand it to them. So these guys come out thinking differently than we did. And I think that's where there's opportunity for entrepreneurs, is to really look at old existing processes that exist and how can you apply new technology to that. So when I saw those opportunities come about, I was like, I'm going to learn how to develop software. I don't know how, but I'm going to learn, right? I can learn anything if I work hard enough. So I went on Google and read everything I could, and then I started because I wanted to understand how to hire someone. If I didn't know how to develop software, how was I going to hire a guy that developed? That would be a really awkward interview, right? I have no idea what to ask you. So I had to learn, and I had to kind of get on top of that. And then when I did hire the developers and raise money to develop our own, I actually sat in the room with them for 6 months and made the developers teach me how to write code and database. And because I needed to know how to throw down the BS flag when they were telling me it couldn't be done, I wanted to know it could.
Yeah.
So I ended up kind of becoming that side of an expert, but starting on the user side, which I think is, and honestly, a plug for girls here, girls make much better UI designers, the user interface designers, than men do, because they're thinking about the experience, not just the factual stuff. It's just a woman, no offense, but it's just true. But no girls think of that as a job in technology, that you don't even hear girls being promoted to go into that field. And yet I would hire a UI designer that was a woman all day long because of their creative abilities to like think about the user experience in a way that a lot of the men don't.
Yeah, and to understand the structure. That's huge. So you touched on a couple of like things. One of them was, with entrepreneurs, like as an entrepreneur, and you're going into it, and you're making that first hire. Yeah. When you were first making those hires, you said you didn't know how to hire somebody or what to look for. How much did you rely on mentors? Is that something you started looking out for, or was that? Did you go and learn everything on Google and just
a lot of it.
cold calling programmers?
No, so I actually, what I would do is I would look for mentors that weren't. Here's the problem: when you go to your friends, which is what we tend to do in college age time frame, we go to because our friends know everything. Our parents know nothing. It's amazing they've survived this long as parents. But our friends know everything, even though they've had not a lick of experience. And so back then. I would originally go to friends and then I'd be like, wait, they've never done it. What am I doing, right? So then I started to kind of look for, okay, who's actually done it and like failed at it? Because there's no one who's going to be a better teacher than someone who tried it and screwed it up. Because then they're going to figure out and get smarter, right, and go on the next time. So I started looking for people who had actually been through the ups and downs, that had kind of made the mistakes, but then learned from them and came back from those mistakes and had done better the next time. And I started to try to look for people like that. And one of the things I learned is that you'd be surprised who will say yes to mentoring you. Right? Yeah. Most people are so intimidated by successful people, they don't even reach out and ask.
They just don't try.
Yeah, they don't try because they think, well, they'll never help me.
I'm just a lowly peon.
Yeah, that is the mindset, right? And the funny thing is, most of the people that have been through it and learned are actually excited to be able to help you learn from them, because they're like, dude, why did I go through this? Not just for me, I hope. And it won't be my kids aren't taking advantage of it, because I know nothing in their eyes. So now I got to go teach other people. And so they want to share what they've learned. They want to help other people to not make the same mistakes as them. And I found I never once had a mentor say no, not one time. So I was able to surround myself with really smart people. And it wasn't just by the flashy smart. I'm not a big fan of I want the people that are like
PhDs and.
Well, it's not just that. It's more about an attitude. Like, I didn't want people that thought they were better than other people. Yeah. I didn't want to become that person. Right? No matter what my success level was, I didn't want to be that person. I wanted to be someone who kept it together and was humble and still willing to give back and doing it for the right reasons. And so I didn't just pick someone who'd had financial success. I picked people that had success but had held their lives together in a way that I could respect and want to look up to and be like.
It would be a good personal mentor, not just a good business
mentor. Well, because you become like the people you surround yourself with. So you better be really careful who you surround yourself with, right?
Absolutely.
And so you have to look at more than just this money success. You want money success, but also that have kept their integrity intact and that they're living in a way that you are respectful of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So you decided to start your own software company. Mm-hmm. You went through you were one of the first generation of people who went on Google and learned what they needed to do, and it had that backing of it as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And you went forward and kicked it off, hired your first employees. Talk to us about how that growth went. From your first sales up.
Hiring is one of the hardest things, I think, because you don't really know what you don't know when you start hiring people, right? Yeah. And so it's really tricky. At first, you try to hire people you think are really cool to hang out with, and they might not really be that good. Or you tend to hire people that are just like you, that have the same strengths you have, right? Yeah. And so I actually got from one of the mentors, I got some incredible advice. They said, Amy, hire people who are smarter than you in each aspect. So, right? So, I'm pretty smart cookie, and we all have that defensive nature, right? Well, I can be good at anything, right? I could do. But what I realized they were saying is your job is to be smart across the board on all these areas a little bit, but then hire people that are really smart and go deep in individual levels. So you have to understand enough about finance that you know how to do the checks and balances, but you hire someone who's obsessed with finance. That is just never going to be me, right? Yeah. I'm not the person that's going to love doing that all day, every day. I go nuts. So you got to hire someone who actually that's their passion, right? And then you got to hire someone who loves HR, because heaven knows I do not love HR, right? So but you need to hire, and so it may not be people that you necessarily are going to go socialize with on a Friday night, and that's okay. Because I think in college especially, that's a mistake, is they're like, I'm going to hang out with people that are super fun and cool, and I always had people around me that I grew to love tremendously, but you can't hire for those. You hire for what's the people that offset my weaknesses. I know my weaknesses, and you have to be really open with yourself about those. and you hire for this, their strengths, and if you surround yourself with a whole team of people that are way smarter than you, you are like for sure going to be successful.
Absolutely. So how does that impact the culture of the company as you started to grow it? Do you progress? In the first year, how many employees did you hire?
Oh geez, so at MediConnect, are we talking MediConnect now?
Yeah.
So MediConnect, we went from 70 people to close to 2,000 people over a period of about 8 or 9 years. Wow. So we had tremendous growth, yeah.
The first 3 years, what was your growth rate? Like 800%? 1,500%
in the first 4 years or 5 years, I think. It was like, we grew a lot. We grew tremendously. And hiring for me was painful because I tend to think that the hiring process is really flawed, right? I'm going to say, I am looking for someone who's good at A, B, and C. Now come in and interview with me. What are you good at? What are you going to say to me? I'm good at A, B, and C because I just asked you to say that, right? You want the job. So I hated that. And so we went through a lot of trial and error in hiring, right? We tried a lot of different things. And I don't want to give credit to him because he's in the room right now and to make his ego get bigger than it is already. But my husband, so I got remarried. I was a single mom for a long time and then got remarried 9 years ago. But my husband actually, when we first got married, he was like, you should really try personality profiling before you hire people. And I was like, oh, that's hocus pocus. It's not even real. So I made fun of it, and he'd be like, no, you should really think about that. It works really well. He did a lot with organizational behavior and management and all that. And so he was like, you should really try that. And I was like, no, we're not trying that. Like, 'cause to me, it just seemed like, I mean, how can you take a test if it's going to tell you about you? Come on, really, right? So finally, I was like, okay, let's not tell my husband, you guys, but let's all take this test as an executive team, and let's just see how wrong it is about all of us, and then I can go home and be like, you're wrong, because that's what we wives, for all of you that are married, we love to do that to you. And so we all took it, and we all read each other's, and we were like, dang, ooh, this is like, it was like dead on, and it was like terrifying, right? We did the Wonderlic. I don't know if you guys have heard of Wonderlic. And we took it's called the CPP, the Comprehensive Personality Profile. And it's like, you take this test and it gives you like a 38-page write-up about everything about a person, like what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And it was like so dead on, it was like terrifying. So then I came home and I made my kids take it because I was like, dude, now I need to know what's up. So you're taking the test, right? So they took it. And it really was an incredible thing to see that this test that didn't even talk to a person could say so much about like what their strengths were going to be, right? And it's not, it does it in a very politically correct way. So you got to kind of read between the lines on what they tell you about someone, but you learn. So we started taking this, having all the employees take it to figure out which personality profiles did best in which positions. And it was really interesting, some of the stuff we learned. So people that had really high math kind of tendencies that were really, really good at math did really, really well with doing any of the like looking at the data and the information on the medical side because they loved the detail, right? But they sucked at being on the phones with customers, right? Whereas people that had the more tendency that they were really good socially and social cues did really well. So it really helped us to kind of come up with some baselines through the company of what our best performers were doing. And then we went and started having every employee that was going to interview take it before they interviewed. So now we had the resume, we had their comprehensive personality profile, and instead of doing an interview, because we were hiring so fast and furious and growing so big, we actually did American Idol meets speed dating. So anyone that came in got 60 seconds to pitch us. We had the executive team sit behind the conference table.
Not just the salespeople. I mean, this
is the whole company. I didn't care if it was a chief officer. This is how you got. Because if your ego was too big to interview this way, we didn't really want you anyway. Because that's just not who we were, right? So we gave people 60 seconds to come in and pitch why they should be hired. And we didn't tell them what to say. There was no position you were hiring for.
No rubric.
We put it out that we were hiring for your talent, not your actual background. So we had one guy come in that was a welder. He'd been a professional welder and he wanted to break into business, right? So the guy pitched us and got hired and ended up later managing a whole department in our account management. Who knew, right? He's like a freaking hard worker. Yeah. Can I say freaking? Really hard worker. So he was a really hard worker and he knew how to work and he just wanted something to give him a chance. So we kind of took this approach of instead of hiring you for a position, we just hired you for your values. Yeah. And if your values were hard work and integrity and all these things, going the extra mile, and then we would put you through training in all the departments, and wherever we saw you had a natural tendency, we would actually then assign you to that, because we found that if they came in with what we called the no MediConnect title, the NMT, because if we gave you a title and then we found out you were better at something else, you were going to be offended, even if you really were better at something else. Whereas if we brought you in with no title and you had no idea, you put it through and then you're excited where we put you and you light up naturally. And so we really kind of flip-flopped the way we hired, and it was unbelievable to look at our retention rates and what happened when we started hiring. 60-second interview, but we had a resume and a personality profile, and we did an IQ test, which was not, by the way, IQ doesn't necessarily mean intelligence. What it means is your ability to multi-learn quickly versus it takes you longer to learn a single thing. That's what we ended up figuring out that it meant. And again, high IQs didn't mean they were necessarily the smartest. They were smart at certain things.
Yeah.
Usually they had a low EQ. If they had a high IQ, it was kind of an interesting thing there in a lot of ways.
Inverse correlation there sometimes.
Yeah, well, a lot of times because they were more factually based and couldn't do relationships very well. So it was just interesting to see how that kind of went down.
Yeah.
But by doing that in the 60-second pitch, it's amazing what people will come up with in 60 seconds to tell you who they are. Like you want to get creative, you're going to see a creative side to somebody in 60 seconds. And it really gave us a feel for who that person was. And then if we had follow-up questions, we would ask those. But we really went to that method of hiring. And for the last several years of the company before we sold, that was so successful for us. And like I said, our retention rates were way high. People were happier. It was, I don't know, it was an interesting way to approach it.
Did you feel like you had a lot of employees grow with your company because of that strategy of hiring?
Yeah, because like I said, we tend to get, we almost pigeonhole ourselves. I'm hired for this position. If you try to move me, it means you didn't think I was good at this position.
Yeah.
And that actually might not be true. We might just think that you're better. You know, it's just like when someone's a really good performer and they think I have to go into management to move up.
Yeah.
Sometimes people that are great performers are terrible managers. And a great performer is not less important than a manager. So we realized we had to adjust our way of paying people too. So we weren't trying to reward them financially. If they were really a high performer and what they were good at, that they would want to stay there and feel like they could still move up in that position and not have to move into management when they're not a good manager.
Yeah.
There's like certain personalities that are better at certain seats on the bus, and you have to really look at your financial salary structure and your bonus structure to make sure you're not disincenting people or making them feel like they're failing for staying good at what they're good at. I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, a lot of times you'll see like, I think it happens a lot with software engineering, where you'll have a software engineer who's really, really good at coding at a certain level, but they try to make a move to become a product manager. And they're terrible at that.
Yeah, and it's not because they're not good, they're just really good at this.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, it's just kind of, you grow where you focus, and so if your focus is in that position all the time, then that's where you're going to grow. If it's in the software and in the code, you're going to grow.
Well, and I'm a big believer that you'll get the most value out of an employee if you let them do something they're really passionate about.
Yeah.
When we're passionate and excited about something, you can tell when someone lights up, right? You can give me certain tasks and I'll be like, oh, just shoot me out. You give me other tasks, I'll be like, I love this. I'll work all day long for this. So if you as a boss want to get the most out of your people, put them in the areas where they really are just genuinely passionate and want to, because you'll get 10 times more production out of them.
That's awesome.
So
it's great feedback, especially with a lot of the online viewers and their experiences with tech companies. Now a lot of tech companies kind of run a much different strategy for hiring, where they hire for performance and they do a lot of testing, but it's all very focused and pigeonholed on execution, I guess, for that specific role. So I think being able to understand
You got a phone call? You want me to say hi?
I think it's my timer. It says I'm not cooking.
Oh.
I don't know how to cook. So moving on from, it sounds, from what you've said to us, it sounds like your team and the practices that you put into hiring quality employees and hiring people that could grow with your company is really what was the key to your success and growth, from those first few hundred employees to
the people by far is the biggest success or failure factor in any business. It really does come down to the people, and I struggle when I see entrepreneurs or CEOs that don't value the people, or they think, you're just a number, you're replaceable. That drives me crazy. Because the actual value in an employee, when you have a good employee and they have good relationships with other employees and good relationships with customers, and they're adding value, and you lose that person over a 50-cent raise or something silly, it's like, are you kidding me? Like, the dollar, if they really stopped and thought about the dollars they're spending to replace a person versus what it would take to retain a person. And it's usually not money. The number one factor of why they leave has nothing to do with money.
It's acknowledgement.
It's feeling like they were valued and that they were important to what they were contributing to what was going on. And so I just am a believer that good employees are just not replaceable, and you need to do what you can to retain those people and treat them in a way that they're going to want to stay. And like I said, money's not the factor. It's really about making them feel like they matter to the overall organization.
That's awesome. So eventually you grew. You grew MediConnect into a massive multinational company, and you were acquired. What was that acquisition process like? How much stress was there? Did you ever feel like it wasn't going to happen or it wasn't going to work out? Kind of tell us about the emotional side of it too. Well,
so it was interesting because at the time, we had been growing, and I had a board that was awesome at doing the whole, just stick to what you're doing, don't get sidetracked, because that's one of the hard parts as an entrepreneur is you start to have a little success. You're getting calls every day from venture capitalists that want to talk to you, from potential acquirers, from investment bankers, and you get so excited because you're like, oh my gosh, I've made it, they're calling me now. But they will call you and call you and call you and call you and literally take all your time. And it ruins the business in the meantime. And I've seen it happen over and over again. And so my board was awesome to say, hey, be that girl at the dance no one can get a dance with, right? Because everybody wants that girl. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't mean it in a like sexist kind of way, but it's a very good analogy. So they were saying just, keep going forward, be the person who's like focused and doing good things, and they're going to want you even more. You don't have to take because I was like, well, if I don't take their call, they'll be offended and then they'll never call again, right? You get a little nervous because when you're an entrepreneur, you're excited for that success. And so they were really good at helping me have the confidence to realize, to respectfully say, thank you so much for checking right now. I'm just really focused on growing the business. But I definitely want to, keep your contact information if something else happens. And it really was a smart advice from them. And it really helped me to truly focus on just growing. So we didn't actually look to sell at the time that we got acquired. We had a company that approached us proactively. Yeah. And it was one of those things where, it was a little bit of a split decision. They really wanted us. They wanted to move fast. They were really impressed with what we had. We were also on this growth trajectory that was unbelievable, that didn't look like it was going to stop anytime soon. So it's always a hard thing of when do you sell, right? But long ago, someone had told me, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. So it always I tried to keep that in my mind, because you can always make more money. Yeah. There's always going to be the promise of more money. And it's really hard to know when's the right time. And I don't think you're ever going to know, for sure. But for me on a personal level, and for my executive team on a personal level, we all felt like, this is a really good situation. And, there's always risk with a business too. Yeah. And so we were like, do we feel good about moving forward? And we had the board all look at it and talk about it, and we all decided, let's go ahead and see what happens here. And we moved very quickly and got the deal closed. But it's a stressful time, and I'll tell you what makes the difference, and it's something that I learned a lot. And again, came from good mentors, right? Yeah. I had like the best board anyone could ask for in their company. And it was only because I just had the courage to ask them to be on the board, and they said yes. So we had an amazing board. And so in that board, one of the things they taught me early on was, you need to get organized with your data. One of the things that happens with an entrepreneur when we angel invest is we'll say, can we get your copies of your NDAs? And they're like, I have to check my email. And you're like, because right? And that's what happens. You start to grow and you're not taking some of those things from the get-go serious. And so by the time you go to look to sell your business, your contracts aren't organized, your documents aren't in place, nothing. Yeah, it's a hot mess. And so then the whole company has to stop and go, let's get our documents organized. In the meantime, no one's running the business, and the sales are falling down, and the customers are upset. And then by the time that happens, the deal doesn't go through. So years before, my board had been really strong to say, get this stuff organized. So we did. We built systems. I was like, okay, I know how to build systems and design them. So I designed systems to track our contracts, right, for internal use. And we designed systems to be able to track our employee compliance and make sure we were doing everything we were supposed to be doing when we were doing, but we had data behind everything. And so at the time that we got approached for a sale and they gave us a list for the data room, we had it up within 24 hours. All the data in there, because it was already internally a data room at our side. So
they're like, due diligence, please. And you were like, wait. Here you go.
Well, and you can imagine the credibility that builds with your buyer. Yeah. Right? Your buyer's like, holy cow, wow. Because if I can tell you, I've never had that happen with any of the deals I've looked at to invest, ever. And if I did, I'd be like, dang, it's really impressive. Yeah, because it really does. It builds confidence that you are on top of it. And it's so easy when you're small to start those processes when you're small. And then let it grow with you, because once you have it in place, it'll stick, and the valuation you'll get will be so much higher on an exit because you were organized on this stuff. Most entrepreneurs are bored with that kind of stuff, right? That's like boring, that's not fun. So you really need a team that will actually really take it serious and help get that data pulled. Yeah. But that is like the key to getting the best exit value, and the key to building confidence in that process is have your data intact and organized.
So entrepreneurs, get organized.
That's true.
If you want the big exit, you have to get organized. So, great exit, wonderful. You went out on the best terms that you wanted, right?
And well, I mean, you can always, let's be honest. It was a really good deal.
Yeah, and then from there, you were faced with the existential question of, who am I? Again, right? And so that's when you decided to launch Rees Capital. Uh-huh. You founded Rees Capital with a number of your with the
chief executives.
Chief executives from MediConnect. What was your vision in founding Rees Capital?
So when we, it is really hard as an entrepreneur. I started at 23. I'm now 45. I sold the company a few years back. So, here I'm like at 40-ish, and you're like, what do I want to do with my life now, right? It's a weird thing because you're so focused always on having your big successes. And so we'd had these small successes along the way, and then you have this major success, and you're like, okay, I've been there and done that, right? And so I'm one of those people, it's like everyone's like, are you going to start another one? And I'm like, I already got to where, I got to where I wanted to go, meaning I learned the life lessons of the things that we learned over the years of doing that company and the companies before that. It's like, that's an education that no one could ever give me. But we went out at a point that I felt like we were doing it all the right way. And we had really figured out those hard lessons. So for me, it was like, okay, I can either just do that again, but I've already kind of grown to the point that I think I can grow doing what I'm doing here. I really want to now take what I've learned and help other people. Because I'm just one of those people that believes there comes a point if you can turn around and help a bunch of other people, think of the ripple effect you could have in life. And so Rees Capital was launched really to be able to work with helping other entrepreneurs. And if I could help them avoid the lessons I learned, I went through a lot of hard lessons. And part of it was because maybe lack of some of the educational experience, maybe lack of just listening when my parents tried to give me advice. I don't know. It's like the lack of being a little bit pig-headed when you're young and having to be humbled up by getting knocked down several times. And so having gone through all those, I thought, man, if I could help even just one or two people to start where I stopped, meaning if I can ideally it's your kids, but they're still not to that age they think I know much yet. So we're working on it, right? My son's here. He's now an adult, married, and about to become a parent of his own. And so he's going to find out really quick what it's like to be the parent that knows nothing. But I really want to take all this stuff in my head and help other people with it. That's like my ideal goal in life, right? So Rees Capital was really started so that we could actually work with entrepreneurs and help them and kind of mentor and guide them and invest in their companies and see if we can do a lot to help there.
So what are you looking for as an investor?
Number one, the people.
Yeah.
It's critical, right? Because the best idea in the wrong people's hands is going to be a failure.
Yeah.
At the same time, the worst idea in the right people's hands could be a success because they'll figure it out, right? And so the people are a lot of the whole thing. I really like people who are teachable. It's really hard, right? If you want to help guide somebody and they're unwilling to be taught, then you can't make an impact. So don't put your money somewhere you can't have an impact, in my opinion. So I like people that come in. I don't expect someone to know it all. I didn't know it all. And I don't think there's anything wrong with not knowing it all. As long as you're...
It's important to not know it all?
I think none of us know it all, right? None of us, I guarantee I don't know it all. But I feel like the issue is being smart enough to know you don't know it all. And being willing to say, I don't know, but I know who to go to, or I'm going to check. And then being really willing to go do the work so the next time you do know it. Yeah. I'm also a big fan of people who don't repeat the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
So we had kind of this rule at MediConnect. You could make any mistake once except for an integrity. If it was an integrity mistake, you were out. We couldn't have tolerance for that because you cannot change that about a person.
Yeah.
But the same mistake twice, like first mistake, you're learning. That's how we learn. We make a mistake, we learn. And we'll all get behind you and we'll all rally and we'll all help you fix your mistake. Yeah. You make that same mistake a second time, you're done. So it was kind of one of those things where, because if you're going to make the same mistake twice, you're never going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
That's a big deal to me, is the kind of make a mistake but then grow from it. And I want the same thing in other entrepreneurs. If they've made a mistake, that's okay.
Yeah.
But did they change their behavior so that same one won't happen again? Then go make a different mistake, right? There's a million of them to make, so have fun with it. But that's a big deal, right, when it comes to their personality type. And the other thing is an idea that solves a problem that's a really widespread problem.
Yeah.
Part of the problem with a lot of entrepreneurs, they get excited about an idea, right? Because it may be genius. It could be a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
But if it only solves a problem for like 1,000 people in the universe, as an investor, you can't make money on that. Now, it's a really cool project for someone. It doesn't mean they might not do a nice lifestyle business, but if they're going to go and raise investment money, they need to solve a problem that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And those ideas are going to come from something where enough people complain. So I'm a big fan of listening when people are complaining. And the more people that are complaining about the same issue, the bigger business opportunity it is for somebody to take advantage of. So I think it's got to be a really big market size, because then I only need the entrepreneur to take a little sliver of that market to succeed. I don't want a market they have to go capture the entire market just to have success.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take as much effort. Look, before I went to college, I was selling Mary Kay cosmetic lipsticks, and I was like, I could spend the same amount of time selling a $10 tube of lipstick as I can spend sending a $100,000 piece of software. It is the same effort. Okay, and that's an area where I was like,
take note, Utah.
It's so true. Listen, it's so true. If you can sell something for $10, you can sell something for $100,000. You'll spend the same amount of time. So you might as well go after those things that you can really do well with. And I think that's where we're looking for big problems that are solved. And I like simple. I love simple. I hate really chat. How many of you guys have heard of chat books, right? So simple, right? Love it, because if you haven't heard of it, it's a software that goes in and because every parent wants to have their little pictures of their kids, right? But no one's got time. Very few people have time these days for scrapbooking and doing all cute, but they start with their first kid good, and then by the second and third it goes downhill, and then the last child's like totally unloved because you clearly didn't put the time into them, right?
So last one of 10.
Yeah, dude. I was 6 out of 10, so I'm like the ignored middle child. So that tells you all kinds of stuff about my personality. But this concept was so simple, right? The husband was a developer, and the wife, he was developing these really high-tech solutions, right? And she was like, I just want my pictures off Facebook printed. That's all or Instagram or whatever. That's all she wanted. And he was like, that's too simple. Like, he's a programmer, right? So he wants complicated and flashy and all these cool features. She just wants something to solve a simple problem.
Yeah.
And so, being a smart man, he listened to his wife. And he decided to go ahead and just do a simple thing that would go in, and when you hit your 60th picture, they download it, print it in a little book, and send it to you. So you don't even have to do anything to get your little scrapbook. Right? Genius, simple. Wish they would have come to me for investment, but they didn't, so I'm a little bitter. But I love those kind of things that are so simple and they solve huge problems. Because, we learned that lesson at MediConnect. We had, in our software development, the programmers always want to do really complex, cool stuff. It's like the harder, the cooler to them. But if no one pays for it, not cool to the entrepreneur, right? Someone's got to pay for it.
Is somebody going to pay for that? No?
So
why are you working on that?
Because it's really cool, and my buddies are going to think I'm cool, right?
It's so hard.
So we had a thing called an annotator, and what it was is when people were looking at medical data, that we were collecting this medical data, the employees that worked for these medical staff that worked for these health insurance companies needed to go in and review the data, and they wanted some way, these ladies would print to paper, and then they'd write and circle and scan the paper back in, right? And we were like, oh my gosh, let's just do an annotator, just a kind of like a little overlay to the document, let them just drop little Post-its and circles and all. So we developed all kinds of features on that, but it was web-based. They couldn't have any ActiveX controls. This is in the last 5 years. So they couldn't have any ActiveX controls because their security protocol, they're still using IE6 or something because they didn't want to, it's crazy. So our programmers put all these colors and pencils and features and clips and all this stuff, and nobody was using it. So I went out and met with the customer, and I'm like, what's the issue? They're like, we just want to circle and drop Post-it notes. That's all. Just give us that. So I had to go back to the developers, and I'm like, you got to hide all this stuff. And they're like, no way, this is so cool. I'm like, trust me, you got to hide it because they're not touching it. And not only that, they don't want an icon. They want a button that says highlight and a button that says Post-it. That's what they wanted. Okay, that's what the users wanted. They have to realize the average user of this was medical nurses that were kind of in their, I'd say between 40 and 60, right? That's what they wanted. So we hid all that stuff, much to their chagrin, and the developers were not super thrilled, but we hid it all, and all of a sudden, everybody loved the product. They thought we had the most genius annotator in the planet because we dumbed it down, and it was easy to use. And all of a sudden, people were thrilled, right? And so kind of a lot of it was trying to help the developers recognize, look, it's only cool if people use it. And that's the same thing with businesses. It's like someone comes to us and I have this awesome idea, and I'm like, but who's going to actually use it?
So it's got to be a big market, and people got to want it.
And it's got to be simple. It's got to be simple. The harder it is, the worse it is. If I have to educate someone for more than 5 minutes on it, it probably is not going to fly.
So you got to be ready to pitch to Amy in 60 seconds.
Oh yeah, ADD right here. But I am taking medication for it, so I highly recommend the meds.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Is there any knowledge that you want to share with these entrepreneurs that really hits close to home to you, either about the struggles that you've been through or just in general how to keep going and endure the grind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that's a question that leads to a lot of things that come to mind, but I think some of the most important things, because I went through making I learned from all kinds of mistakes, right? And trying to do it one way, it didn't work. And I think part of it is recognizing that you're not failing if you learned something that makes you smarter, and really looking at it differently, because we get afraid because we don't want to fail. And so if you kind of look at it as non-failure, as long as I walked away a little bit smarter and I could do better next time, it gets over your fear of failing, because now you see it as a learning experience. And you don't kick yourself. We tend to beat ourselves up quite a bit, and women worse than men sometimes publicly, right? Men are better at hiding it in public. They always look good no matter what they look like. So, I'm just saying. So, but as far as like that part, it's not being afraid of the thought of failing. Like, don't look at it as if I fail, this is humiliating. It's like looking at it as, okay, I'm going to try this and put myself out there, and if it doesn't work out, I'm going to have learned from that, and then I'm going to go at it next time smarter. So I think that's a big one. I think the other one is, and this is, so on my wall at my office, we had a quote that said, do what's right. And it was our way of just remembering to do the right thing. And then we actually added to it, and people from the local area here will laugh, we added, let the consequence follow. And the reason we did is because in business, there's so many times you're faced with a situation where it's so tempting to justify how you're going to handle it. So for example, you go to submit an RFP for a new client, right? You're trying to, the request for proposal to land a big sales account. You know your competitor is lying. They're lying about the number of customers they have. They're lying about what they can do. And you're like, okay, if we don't also say what they're saying, then we're going to lose the deal. We can't have them win because they're going to win cheating and they're going to win lying, so we got to stop them. We got to be the integrity police here. And you get yourself all worked into a thing where you can justify almost anything. So it's really important to say, look, they're going to lie. We know they're going to lie. We're going to do it honestly. It may mean we don't get the deal in the end, but we're going to keep our integrity intact. And that's going to matter more to us than the deal. And that's something that you really have to kind of really have a group around you that's also willing to police you and you police them. And so the executive team knew, do what's right, let the consequence follow, which meant anytime we started to find ourselves in a conversation where we would be tempted at all to justify something, we'd be like, no, we're going to be okay to lose that deal. We're going to be okay to walk away from this. You know, we're going to be okay. If you have an employee, for example, who's a really talented person, but they treat everybody with disrespect, you have to be willing to cut that person knowing it's going to hurt to get rid of that talented person because they have a lot of talent. But you have to do it because it's ultimately the right thing to do no matter what consequence follows. And for me, that's a big one, is just remember that success will come and go, but integrity is forever. Because that becomes, it's hard, especially with young people, to have them see that as an asset financially, but it truly is. If you can have a reputation of doing the right thing for the right reason, it gets out there. And we had customers, we landed huge accounts that had heard we were honest and they'd been cheated by another vendor, so they would come to us. And like it really did, it pays off financially in droves, but it's not something you can prove on a spreadsheet to someone, so it's hard for them to believe you, but it really does. That's like the most valuable asset you have, is your reputation of integrity.
I think Uber's learning that. So.
I am not going to comment on anything at this point.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, for joining us tonight. Let's give Amy a big round of applause. So we want to open it up for like the next 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. So we ask that you keep it focused on questions that are entrepreneurial related, that relate for all of us and the enlightenment of all of us, instead of just, your 60-second pitch. So we'll go ahead and start with this gentleman on the front row. Just come on up and I'll hand you the microphone.
Thank you. So you were a user. And you saw the big picture for what was needed for MediConnect.
Yes.
But you weren't a programmer, but you needed to hire programmers to create the dream that you had in mind, right? How did you finance that? That's an agile process.
So my first company was actually bootstrapped. When I started my first company that did the software development, we were bootstrapping to begin it, and that was when I was a reseller for someone else. And then we ended up having, at the time we said develop our own. I had raised venture capital, and here's the funny part. I had no idea what venture capital was at that point. I mean, I was like 25 or 6 or something at the time. I was really young. And so I literally got on to Google and said, how do you raise capital? Because I didn't know. We'd always bootstrapped and we'd been profitable, and I'd only grown from my profits. So I'd never really experienced raising capital. And it said, well, you have to write a business plan. So I Googled, how do you write a business plan? Because I literally had no idea, right? So I Googled it, and there was this little software from a company called Palo Alto something Pro, and it's called Business Plan Pro. So I did for $80, which to me was a ton of money back then. Okay, so $80 for the software. And it literally would ask a question, you'd answer, and it started to write a business plan. And I did this little thing in 24 hours, and then I got on a website and Googled, who do you send it to? And it said, go to venture capital. So I just started Googling venture capitalist contact and emailing that baby out to everyone I could think of. No idea what I was doing, right? But it worked, and we raised $2 million, mostly because I was a profitable company, right? We were operating this company. I mean, to tell you how little I knew about the financial side at that point, my father, who had given me like $5,000 as an equity stake for my first company, which was the hardest money I've ever raised, P.S., because my dad's FBI, so tough man to raise money from. But that we sat down at our first meeting when I gave him the reports out of QuickBooks. Back then, I was like 24 or something. Handed him the report, and he's like, wow, you're operating at a 38% EBITDA margin. And I was like, awesome. And I'm like, I don't even know what EBITDA means. So I had to go. That is a true story. But he was like all proud of me, and I'm like, okay, sweet. And I had no idea what he meant. But apparently, so I think the fact that we were profitable, and I actually love companies that are willing to bootstrap, because I really think it taught me so many lessons about being responsible. I get really worried today. We see a lot of young people that go and raise a crazy amount of money because they can. And guess what they do? They then spend a crazy amount of money, and they don't learn the discipline for the business. And I do worry about that. I wish in colleges maybe we'd put a little more focus on bootstrapping and why that's good for the young people, because there's just so much razzle-dazzle around, go raise $1 billion, right? But it doesn't teach you a lot, because you're going to spend what you raise. You will spend everything you raise. So if you raise less, you'll work harder to sell and grow that way. So.
Thank you.
Not the like really brilliant story you expected, right? How do you raise money?
So you mentioned that your experience when you started your business, you did so when you were pretty young. 24 years old was when you started your company.
23, yeah.
23, even younger. There's a lot of, I think the startup world is filled with stories similar to that, where somebody comes out of college, they have an idea, or they're just passionate about something, and in their early 20s, they catch lightning in a bottle and they're off and running. Is that experience of going off on your own when you're young, is that experience different than potentially starting a business when you're in your 30s or 40s? And if so, how and what advice would you give to somebody who might be doing it a little bit later in life?
Yeah, I think when you're young, here a lot of people think their first idea is going to be their life idea. And I actually don't think that happens very often. I think the first idea ends up being kind of an education phase for somebody, right? And so for me, I don't think that you have to look at, I have to go for, like some people are like, this is going to be my $1 billion Steve Jobs idea, right? Come up with a good idea that you can do, that even if it's not going to be the $1 billion company, that first idea is at least going to teach you how to run a responsible business. And because if you're going to have mistakes, it's easier to do it when you're still a smaller company, right? You get bigger, those mistakes are a lot costlier. So I think it's good for kids to like try a startup that can teach them some lessons. And maybe it will turn out to be the $1 billion deal, but it doesn't need to be a good one for that stage. And then I think it's easier as you've had a few of those, startups and successes and startups and failures, then to kind of get that sense of what works so that you can step into something with a little bit more maturity and wisdom behind you, frankly, at that age. So I don't think there's a negative to starting older. I don't think there's an age at which it works or doesn't work, to be honest with you. I think the factor where it appears age matters is that a lot of times at that age, when you're 20 years old, well, most people don't have 2 kids. I came to college when I was 17, so it's kind of a little slack here. But, a lot of people at that age, you don't have as many responsibilities, right? A lot of the people in college, they don't have kids they have to feed and a spouse they have to worry about and all those things. And it gets harder because the older you get, the more you have these life responsibilities and you got things you got to take care of and responsibilities to people. So it's harder to take that risk. And I think that's where it gets harder as you get older. But I think the beauty is even if you didn't start something younger, you've learned a lot. Every job you ever take is going to teach you something that's going to make you a good entrepreneur. Like every job I had taught me what worked and what didn't work and what example to follow and what not to follow. And you could look at people and be like, I do not want to be like that person, or I do want to do what this person did, right? And then you can incorporate those into your company. Because a lot of the best ideas aren't the first unique idea. What's that saying? Like the second mouse gets the cheese, right? Because the first mouse got caught in the trap and now you can go get the cheese. So I'm a big fan of looking at existing businesses and finding ways to improve those too, because someone's already proven a lot of the risk out and now you can just take it and make it better. Oh, sorry. I don't have the mic.
Yeah. Amy, you talked a little bit about your board.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about your board and how excellent they were and helping keep you focused and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about when you put that board together, how you thought about the composition of the board? Because I think as entrepreneurs, we see a lot of startups who put together boards of just names.
Yes.
And other people who think about it more, who's going to bring the most value to my business, and how do you think about that balance?
I think a lot of entrepreneurs too, if they take money from anybody, they're just like, well, I'll give you a board seat, right? And you need more than money on the board. So you're always going to have some of the investors that have a board seat. That's just a given. If someone's putting money into it, they're probably going to take a board seat if it's enough money, right? If it's sizable enough money. So you're going to have those people that are in just purely as investors. But I think it's really important to look for, I wanted people that had really deep industry kind of network so that they knew a lot of people in the industry and they had a lot of ties they could bring to the table, because the value of their network is going to open doors for you that you could eventually get into, but it's going to take you way longer than someone who's already in the door and has that trust factor going for them. So if you can actually look for people that have had deep domain experience in that space, or that have deep customer connections, right? Someone that's kind of had relationships with customers that can bring that to the table. And you want to kind of have different seats on your board. So as I thought about my board, I tried to think of people that were people that were just really smart investors. We had one person who was on the board of KPMG and had really good financial audit experience that could actually be like that check and balance for us to make sure everything on our numbers was, we were always on top of stuff and we're going to ever do anything that would somehow have been a mistake that got us in trouble. We wanted to be really strict on that. So I had someone who's really, really brilliant in that area. And then we had someone that came from the deep medical experience understood the compliance and all the complexities around that for medical. And so each seat had a different purpose, right? And the importance of the names is really more about the trust other people have in that name, right? So it's not a flashy name, it's really someone who people realize that's a person of integrity that can also be trusted. Because when you go to exit, they're really looking at, would those board members be involved if that company wasn't a good company? And if that company wasn't doing the right things, these are people who wouldn't put their name on it. And so I really looked at that too, people that brought that kind of level of respect and credibility to the table. But I also looked for people that wouldn't be afraid to tell me what I needed to hear, right? You need people, I think that's one of the hardest things as an entrepreneur. We forget, especially with your employees, right? You forget that you're gonna ask them to give you feedback and you could fire them, so they're scared to death of you, just by nature, right? And so it's your job as the entrepreneur to make sure that you are asking for input and advice in a way that's really they're gonna have trust and know that they can give it to you without losing their job. Otherwise, you're never gonna get better, because if you are surrounded by a bunch of yes men, you're toast, because you gotta improve, and you have as many weaknesses as everybody around you does. And the problem with your weaknesses are that they ripple and they take a lot longer to fix. So let's say that I have a weakness in an area. We'll pick one that I don't have, because we're not gonna like share as I do. I don't know yell that well, no, just kidding. But let's say that like if I had a hot temper or something, right, which I don't, but if someone did, let's say they fix their hot temper, right? Well, so they get over their thing. Well, what's happened in the meantime is everyone around them has started to pick up their bad habits. Just like being a parent with your kid, right? So now this person has a hot temper, they fix their hot temper. But guess what? The people that picked up the hot temper because they're around them, takes them 10 times longer to fix it after you fix it. So there's like this really bad ripple effect. Every mistake you as an entrepreneur make, they're gonna make it, and even though you might fix it and correct it, it's gonna take them forever to correct it, and that's gonna penalize you in the end. So you really have to have people that will tell you your weaknesses so you can fix them quick. You have in my opinion, you have a bigger duty to fix them quick, or it's gonna hurt you. So you need people that report to you to be able to be open with you, and then you need a board that's got the gumption and the wisdom and the confidence to tell you what you need to hear, even when you don't want to hear it. And don't think it was always easy. There was times I would disagree with certain board members, and it was hard. Like, it's emotionally really hard. And I'd be frustrated, but I had to like sit back and go, okay, they know better than I do, right? And that took me a long time in life to learn, because I didn't really understand the value of a board when I was early. It wasn't until later that I really started to understand what the board's for. Because I think you're threatened by a board when you're young. You think they're just there to be the mean guys or whatever, and what you learn is they're really the most valuable asset your company has, is that board when it comes to helping you grow and helping you to exit successfully. It's your board. And part of your number one job is to keep that board informed at all times with the bad news before anybody else. Like, you want them to know. Don't be afraid of them, because when you're afraid of them, that's when things go sideways. So.
What year did you form the board?
At MediConnect, we formed our board in 2000. Well, we formed the company in 2006. That's when we brought in the new board, and we took our time. We had some board members that came in right away, and then other board members that we added. So don't feel a rush to have to add everybody right now. Like, we added a few, and then we added more as we went. So we kept open seats that we could fill.
Should entrepreneurs try to put together a board before they bring on investors?
You're going to have to give some seats to an investor if they're a sizable investor, but it's good to at least have a couple of board members. You know, we had a 7-person board. So my board was like Jim Sorensen, Alan Hall, Dinesh Patel, Charlie Johnson, and Scott Parker. Like, come on, like, awesome board, right? Like, they didn't get better than that. I was so blessed for that board. And they were such good advisors to me. But like, we didn't start with all 7 of us, right? Like, it was like we started with a couple, and then we'd add more and more. And so you want to keep the seats available to fill it with the right. It's more important to get the right person than it is to just hurry up and fill it.
Okay, so I think we got time for one more quick question.
Ooh, this better be good. Pressure's on.
I hope it is. When you talk about your issue with founders not having their act together when it comes time to make a deal, I feel like in the private equity space, when you get talking about like the bigger deals, you have bankers kind of taking the role of like facilitating that whole process. I feel like you don't really have that in like the startup space. My question is, if that's true, why is that the case, and would you recommend that to like someone who's young and wants to get into like venture capital or private equity as an avenue, as opposed to like the traditional like Harvard MBA way of getting to become a VC?
So are you asking for whether the entrepreneurs need to like seek out investment bankers to help them early on? Did I understand the question?
Like, in short form, like, why is there not like as much M&A like shop activity on those smaller like angel investment deals where you have someone facilitating that process before you come to someone like yourself?
I think that because it's the money, right? The guys that are doing the investment banker, they're to take a big chunk of the company when they help sell it, so therefore they're not going to help these younger companies get a deal because there's just not enough money. And I think it's a money issue for them. That's why they're not as involved. I'll be totally honest, and I hope I don't offend anyone in this room. Investment bankers, I struggled with utilizing investment banks because we ended up doing all the work anyway, and then you pay a lot of money for it, so that was hard. So I really think you have to evaluate. Some companies need an investment banker because they don't have the connections to the outside world. And in those cases, they can be extremely valuable, right? If you already have the connections and the relationships, I think it becomes this extra layer a little bit sometimes. So you have to kind of look at when's the right time to use an investment banker and when's not. And you really have to have a good fit as an investment banker involved for it to go well. Because you're still going to be the one responsible to get all that data. They don't know your company. They don't know how to get your data. You're still going to have to do all that work. And then it really comes down to, do you need them for the relationship building or not? And I think that the reason we don't see more of that activity in the younger companies is because usually investment bankers work on a percentage of a deal, right? So they get a percentage of the M&A deal. So you're not going to have as many that want to get involved when there's these young companies and these young startups. I think what they need at that stage is some advice about how to get their organization together, right? Because they don't really know. If they haven't been through the process, when you get your first due diligence list, you're like, oh my gosh, this will take me years. I mean, it really does. I almost cried the first time my first company, I was like, that's way too much information. We'll never get this done. And it really is, it's very intimidating. I wish in colleges we taught a little more. If you get into an M&A deal, here's the type of data they want to see, because then people would know going into a company and starting it, this is what I should be pulling together in the first place. But there's really not a lot of talk about that until you're so far down the road that you're ready to do a deal, and by then it's like that's when the pain hits. So, but I think that's why we don't see more in that space as the bankers. And I do think there's areas that bankers are really valuable. There's areas that it's not as valuable. So it's hard. That's a hard one for me because I've had good and bad experiences, right? And everybody's experience is going to come at it differently. But
you do have a lot of banks pitching you deals.
We had nowadays. There's not as many that pitch to the angel investors. So right now it's mostly you'll get family offices that come together and collaborate on deals. But the bankers usually aren't getting involved unless it's they're looking to raise a huge amount of equity, because they just don't, for them there's not the payoff in the littler deals. So you don't see that as often now. But there's good ones and there's bad ones, just like everything else, right? But in the younger, I don't see many entrepreneurs working with them, to be honest with you.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because it's until they start to call you, and they're like, you'll know that you're at a certain size when you start getting those phone calls every day, and that tells you that you're there. But
thank you so much for coming out tonight. Let's give her another warm round of applause. Thank you, Amy Rees Anderson.